Welcome to the Industrial Talk Podcast with Scott McKenzie. Scott is a passionate industry professional dedicated to transferring cutting-edge, industry-focused innovations and trends while highlighting the men and women who keep the world moving. So put on your hard hat, grab your work boots, and let's go.
Thank you once again for joining Industrial Talk, and absolutely thank you for your continued support. We are building a platform that celebrates industry professionals all around the world. Because you're bold, you're brave, you dare greatly, you innovate, you collaborate, you're solving problems, and you're making the world a better place without a doubt. That's why we celebrate you here on Industrial Talk. And if you could tell by a little bit of the noise in the background, we are at OMG Q1 Meeting. It's not a conference, it's a meeting. And it is a collection of professionals getting together and debating and making your life better, and you don't even know it. That's what they do. That's what they do. So if you have any interest, which you should, get in contact with omg.org. You will not be disappointed. In a hot seat, as you can tell, Chuck is there. Chuck Byers. He is the Chief Technology Officer at Industry IoT Consortium. Let's get cracking with the conversation.
Excellent.
Chuck.
Hey, thanks for having me, Scott. And I'm looking forward to talking with you once again. We've been on a few of these before, and I just love it.
Yeah, they're a lot of fun. But what makes it fun, Chuck, quite frankly, it's me living my the Discovery Channel dream, and I get to talk to you, and I get to talk to others, and I get to hear about all of the incredible innovation and conversations, especially happen here. It never stops.
Yeah, the entire world of consortia and standards development organizations, they're always working to better the world. They're always working to improve trustworthiness and improve performance of networks and improve the way that you interact with anything with a transistor in it. That's what really the folks in this room are about, is how the infrastructure associated with all those devices that you rely on a minute-by-minute basis is put together.
See, I don't think we have an appreciation, because you are the unsung hero. We don't know that it exists. We don't know that our world is, in a positive way, being driven by standards, and that's why you guys are just unsung. I don't know how else to put it. I geek out on this stuff. And
think about the USB thing that you use to plug in every device and charge everything. That's the standard that you touch every day. But standards that you really can't touch every day are related to the way the data is operating inside of those machines. What's going across that USB cable? How we manage all of the security and privacy and safety of that kind of thing. It's a huge problem. There are literally reams and reams and reams of standards that this organization has put out describing all of that stuff.
I don't know, man. I get all giddy and excited about it. And now we're here at this OMG event, and it reflects a lot of the other consortiums, and it's just people getting together who are passionate about doing what is right. That's one thing. What are you at Industry IoT Consortium focused on?
We're really about the Internet of Things. That's the 50 billion devices by the middle of this decade, and probably a couple of 100 billion devices by the end of the decade that are going to be connected to the Internet. And by device, I'm not just talking about your cell phone. I'm talking about a temperature sensor or a street light. Every street light in the world is going to be individually controllable through these kinds of IoT, Internet of Things technologies. And why, you might ask yourself, why the heck would I ever want to control every street light in the world? Well, think about using them as a mechanism to, for example, direct an evacuation. If I can control every street light, I can strobe them in the direction that I want the people to go away from the dangers, right? So I got to have billions of street lights under control so that no matter where you are, no matter what the danger is, you can direct people without really any other technological infrastructure to go in the direction the authorities think they ought to go. That's an example of why you need to control everything, because if you can't control everything, you can't make those strobe patterns to tell people where to go. And there's hundreds of thousands of examples of applications like that you're going to see in the future, directly enabled by the fact that there's up to 100 billion IoT devices, individually controllable through digital means.
How does the Industry IoT Consortium and the members and everybody that's passionate about that keep up with the velocity and the changes taking place within the market, and make sure that the standards are properly being developed, and because use cases are constantly being developed and it just never ends. How does an organization like that be nimble enough to do that?
Yeah, that's an ongoing challenge for us. I would say that the diversity of our membership and the giant brains represented in our membership are really one of our important weapons in that struggle, because you need to have people from all different organizations, chip companies, equipment companies, service companies, the network operators, various kinds of governmental organizations. We're all interconnected in a tight web of sharing opinions, brainstorming ideas, and figuring out what we need to do in terms of best practices and reference architectures and the output product that we make that helps drive the industry and the standards that the industry is creating.
The other area of that is when you start mentioning trustworthiness, because this is a global thing, right?
Yes.
And it's happening everywhere to some extent or another, to some degree or another. One of the feedbacks that I get specifically in the field when talking to companies is like, one, I hear you, I hear IoT, but IoT is becoming like this miscellaneous file. Yeah. There's a lot of sort of confusion. I get it. I see the device. I know that. But it's like, I get it. Where do I start? And who do I trust? Not in that order. It's the trust thing.
Right.
So
IIC has a very deliberate definition of trustworthiness, and it consists of 5 different attributes that are applied in various ratios depending on what the problem is. And here come the 5. The first one is security in the standard cybersecurity sense, and I'm sure we've all heard the buzz on that. The second one is privacy, because this data is potentially personally identifiable and potentially highly private. It could be healthcare data, it could be data about where you're driving or what you're buying at the grocery store or whatever. The third attribute that we talk about in terms of trustworthiness is safety. So these systems are potentially controlling very sophisticated and dangerous devices. And remember, the Internet of Things is not just about sensors that are reading temperatures. It's about controlling things. It's about what's called actuators. And as soon as you add actuators to the mix, then you end up with a whole new set of problems. So sure, it's irritating if a card reader is compromised and a bunch of credit card numbers go into the wild. Yeah. But think about what happens if you compromise your reactor, your refinery, your locomotive, your kid's implantable insulin pump. Yeah. What happens if those are compromised? Yeah. Now, rather than just having to pay somebody for 2 years of credit monitoring, you're going to have to figure out what happens when people get killed as a direct result of Internet of Things being compromised. So the stakes are much higher for IoT devices, especially those devices that add actuators where a hacker can control the physical world.
I digress quickly because we have 2 more points on this.
Yes.
But I digress. When I was at an event and we wwere talking about CNCs, and these are connected devices. Now they're very sophisticated connected devices, and when you say compromised, you could just say a millimeter. You can modify that, whatever that part by a millimeter, and now it's out of spec, and you just, whatever it might be.
And all the valves you make on that CNC device are going to leak like a sieve because it's a millimeter too small.
That's right. Yep. See, that's just so amazing.
That could happen. I worry. I certainly worry about the whole manufacturing ecosystem.
Yeah.
What happens if the welder gas flow is wrong and the welds are all contaminated. You might not know that they're a third as strong as they're supposed to be, but they're cosmetically the same, but because you compromise the gas flow and maybe mask the sensor, you can do that if you're a hacker, and all of a sudden, every car's spot welds are inadequate. Yeah. And that compromises the safety of that vehicle, it compromises its longevity.
But the reality, Chuck, it's happening. So we need a solution. It's inevitable, and so we need it. You can listen to Chuck and get all nervous about what he's saying, because it can be, but the reality is if you're not engaged and you're not figuring that out, it's happening whether you like it or not. It is. So
don't play ostrich. You gotta stick your head way up over the prairie and try to figure out what's going on. And certainly IIC has an entire set of security recommendations. We have a document called the Industrial Internet Security Framework that you can search for those words, and it will give you very significant sets of recommendations on how to take your Internet of Things system and make it, I almost said immune, make it highly resistant to compromise.
Yeah, and again, for the listeners out there, these frameworks, these documents that are being offered by IIC are thoroughly vetted.
Oh, yes.
And vetted some more and debated. And so the product that sees the light of day and is offered into the marketplace, I feel comfortable.
I certainly do too, and I wouldn't have a problem, riding on a train or submitting to an implantable medical device that was based on those recommendations, because those recommendations really do anticipate a lot of the attack vectors, a lot of the vulnerabilities, and tend to modify their recommendations based on the consequences of that compromise.
Okay, we have two more points.
Right. So we talked about security, privacy, safety.
Yeah.
The last two are related: reliability and resilience. And reliability basically means, what happens if something fails? Things inevitably fail. Transistors die, static electricity zaps something, a network goes down, whatever it is. We need to figure out how to continue the service, especially mission-critical and life-critical services, in the presence of various failures. And we do that through various mechanisms of redundancy and reliability and different types of computer networking that can take over if the primary network fails. So we have lots of recommendations about how to connect your Internet of Things devices to the backbone of the Internet in order to give us measures of reliability. Reliability is what happens if something fails hard. Resilience is more like what happens if something's overloaded, what happens if a fiber optic connection is compromised, what happens if there's a denial of service attack going on. The network is probably still working, the device is probably still accessible, but not with its full performance or capabilities. And under those circumstances, we have recommendations on redundancy for processing, storage, networking, all of those functions in order to try to make that network more reliable and more resilient so that we can trust the service that's operating on that network regardless of those unanticipated failure and overload consequences.
So here's an analogy that I like using quite a bit. So I like F1. And so you have this car. This car is completely connected. And everybody sees exactly what's going on, can make the changes, they can do everything to optimize the performance of that asset. And I think that's the tip of that mountain. That is like, this is gonna. But I think that if you're in manufacturing or industry in general, and you're not committed to figuring out how to be able to do the stuff that is necessary to visibly see your asset, your business, I think you're going to be missing out. And your competition is definitely doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually had the pleasure of visiting the McLaren Tech Center in UK.
They're doing poorly in F1, just FYI.
Yeah, I know that it's not the greatest year, but
no, it is not.
But they their technical capabilities are spectacular. They won't tell me exactly what the number is, but I would expect that there's over 1,000 sensors in each of those cars that they produce.
Easily.
And there are also actuators that are able to tune every single performance parameter of the engine, the suspension, the braking, the way the human interface to the car, the way the control inputs from the driver are put into the system. All of that stuff is directly modifiable and adjustable. And as a result, they have full visibility. They've done what's called digital transformation of what used to be a fairly nut and bolt industry. Right now, without the digital technologies, they would have no hope of competition. And what they've done is they've taken the information technology that used to be just, recording statistics on a spreadsheet of what they did after the fact. And the operations technology, which is the mechanic going out there and spinning the bolts to modify the tensions on the suspension systems. What they've done is they've merged those two operations and information technology universes together into a unified whole. And that unified whole represents the digital transformation of that business in a way that's highly beneficial to that business. I think you're going to see digital transformation. In fact, IIC is one of the leaders in these recommendations for digital transformation across pretty much every industry. I mean, it's going to happen universally. And there's certain frictions in some companies, especially some old school 100-year-old kind of companies, where the CIO, the Chief Information Officer, and the Chief Operations Officer, the king of the factories, whoever they are, they don't talk to each other. They're probably competing for budget, right? And those companies are doomed. So my advice to you is if you are somebody in operations or somebody in information technology, high up in these companies, go have lunch with your counterpart immediately and figure out how to not compete, but to strictly cooperate.
There. Well said, Chuck. Absolutely. One of the areas that I think, from my perspective, and in talking to many out there, the conversations around security, right? So all of this is great, but if you're not properly protected in some way, shape, there's other areas. And what I'm finding with many, it's like, one, when you start talking about security, people start going, I don't know, they're just trying to prevent me from doing my work. That's one. Mm-hmm. And then two, I don't understand it, so I'm not going to listen anyway, right?
Yes.
But and then three, because I had been hacked, and I'm not going to air my dirty laundry and but that conversation is so needed, and I find IIC is a great way to have that conversation without,
Yeah, we talk a lot about hypotheticals, even though those hypothetical scenarios are almost always grounded in somebody's recent experience.
Yes.
We certainly don't air the dirty laundry. We don't ask for details or proof or anything.
Right.
We take, if we say, there's an opportunity to compromise this type of network, or 5G's got these vulnerabilities, or fiber optic can or can't be tapped, all these kinds of questions. We take them seriously, and we try to understand that there's really no mechanism to air gap yourself from the internet. That's a term which very critical installations, they disconnect all the cables. There's no cables that go between that critical bubble of installations in the internet. You can't do that anymore because you can't digitally transform your business unless you have access to that whole thing.
Absolutely.
So what we're trying to do is to try to figure out how to replug the wiring across the air gap, yet have the kind of security, trustworthiness, and confidence that you had that nobody can hack this thing, even though there's lots of connections. Nobody can hack it. It turns out they could hack it even when it was air gapped, because stupid people reach in their pocket and they pull out one of those USB things and haul it right across the air gap.
So spot on.
So we as IAC are really working diligently to try to give advice. And one of the mechanisms that we've done to give that advice is what's called a security maturity model. It's a self-assessment that you can do, and you can grab the security maturity model self-assessment instrument off of our website, iiconsortium.org, and you can just take it, and then you can get some information, sort of a score, on how secure or not secure your installation is. And then there's direct pointing to chapter and verse of our industrial internet security framework.
I just need to interrupt real quick. Some people don't want to take that assessment because they just don't want to find the results, because once they find the results, they have to take action, which is a good thing. Don't get me wrong, but it's so funny when you say that. It's like, I can see, okay, let's answer it right or correctly here.
It's not like IIC is going to rat you out if you have a lousy security score, because it's all you download the thing, you fill in the spreadsheet, it self-scores. It's not like you're sharing anything with anybody that's going to be discoverable in litigation. I know that's one of the things that people worry about.
Yeah, everybody does.
Yeah, but in general, you're better off knowing. And let's say that you were one of those playing ostrich head in the sand kind of folks that thought security is somebody else's problem. If you just take the hour or two it might take you to do the self-assessment, and it turns out your score is really lousy, you might not start to act immediately, but you might, for example, decide that you're not going to put your pre-release quarterly report information on the public internet at this point because it's easy enough for your corporate network to be compromised. So knowing is always better than not knowing. Acting is always better than not acting, but knowing without acting is still useful.
Again, Chuck, hitting it out of the park in a big doggone way. Is there anything that is sort of unique with this particular meeting that you want to highlight and tell the listeners outside of the five things that are just absolutely home run? Yeah, you're 5 for 5.
We are. The IIC tends to have a few things that we work on as a sort of a thrust, a sort of a repeated common theme. And this trustworthiness thing was our thrust 2 or 3 years ago, and it's gotten huge traction across the industry. Digital transformation is the one that we've been working on for the last couple of years. The new thing, the thing that we're starting on in this meeting and intend to continue on for the coming year or two, is sustainability. So the Internet of Things, it turns out, is very useful to all of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And if you just search for UN SDG, Sustainable Development Goals, you'll see that there's 17 goals that the United Nations has provided for the human race to basically make our ride on the planet a little smoother. And there's around those 17 goals, and it's things like energy efficiency and healthcare and poverty and food security. Those are the kinds of things that those goals are. There's a couple of them that are sort of related to industrial processes and systems of infrastructure that we think that IIC is particularly interested in, although we're going to do what we can on all 17 goals. Below those goals, those 17 goals, are 169 sort of recommended areas of action. And we've been doing diligent analysis of all 169, and we see that IIC has potentially got Internet of Things input for about half of those. So well over, well over 50 or 75 of those things. We think we got an opportunity to do something. And all of our work groups and task groups have been chartered with, let's figure out what we can do to help sustainability and by extension help to save the planet and improve the lot of the majority of the human race.
I'm always fascinated by how all of this energy and the people and moving around and all of this stuff absolutely comes together and moves forward, because every time I have these conversations, well, what about this? What about that? How does it? And I can appreciate what your organization is accomplishing, because it's like herding cats.
It certainly is.
Smart cats that have a passion to really helping, but it's just how do you pull that all together and do something?
Yeah, it was once said that standards development work is like herding cats, and it's worse. It's like herding feral cats.
It's true.
That's kind of what my challenge as the new CTO is. I'm trying to figure out how to herd this conglomeration of feral cats. all of which are probably smarter than me. So that's my task.
And no, yeah, no, there's some brilliant people, and it's like, oh gosh, Chuck, how do they get a hold of you, and how do they become part of the Industry IoT Consortium?
You can go to iiconsortium.org, and there's lots of resources on the resource page to learn about all these publications and maturity models I talked about. And there's info available, or you can just send it to Byers, BYERS, at iiconsortium.org, and you can reach me directly.
That's Chuck Byers right there.
Thank you so much, Scott.
Absolutely.
Always a pleasure.
All right, we're going to wrap it up on the other side. We're going to have all the contact information, and really, go out to their website, find out more, get that information, pull it down, see how thorough it is, and really experience just the thoroughness of those documents. All right, we're going to wrap it up on the other side, so stay tuned. We will be right back.
You're listening to the Industrial Talk Podcast Network.
All right, once again, thank you very much for joining Industrial Talk, and thank you for your continued support. We are building a platform that is dedicated to industrial professionals. I say it all the time. You cannot deny that. Now, that was Chuck. Industry IoT Consortium. You know what I got out of that conversation? 1, he's smart. 2, the consortium is a collection of people that are truly working to solve problems, creating trustworthiness. That's what they do all the time. That was just Q1. I did Q4, the meeting in Austin, and they are passionate. They are passionate of solving problems and creating incredible standards that help us succeed. That's what they are all about. Industry IoT. You'll have all the contact information for Chuck and his team out there on Industrial Talk. And once again, you have to be about collaborating. This stuff is just, and educating and innovating. This stuff is happening so quickly. And the only way that I know is that you got to collaborate. You need to get engaged. You need to work with people like Chuck and others to come up with solutions that help you create that business that is resilient. Continue to educate. Focus on collaborating, and whether you like it or not, innovate. All right. OMG, this was Q1. Put that on your calendar. Be a part of it. Look at omg.org, all the consortiums out there. Be bold, be brave. Dare greatly. I say it all the time. Hang out with Chuck, and you're going to change the world. We're going to have another great conversation coming from OMG. So stay tuned.